Well, good morning, everybody. It's 10 o'clock, so to respect your time, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to Breaking Barriers to Recruitment and Retention. I'm Dr. Candice McDonald. I'm super excited to be sharing with all of you today on a Sunday morning. And for those of you dads out there in the audience, happy Father's Day. Thank you for joining us today on your special day. So a little bit about myself before we get started. I've been in the fire service for almost 20 years. I've served in a number of different roles as a structural firefighter, EMT, EMS officer, and inspector, CE educator. So got a bit of a history in the fire service. It definitely goes pretty quick. My background as far as a professional background, I spent about a decade in the mental health world as a drug and alcohol counselor and social worker. And then I shifted over into the marketing world and spent about 7 to 10 years working for the state of Ohio in marketing. And during that time, I really missed helping people. So as I started to look at my journey, I decided to go back to school, and I got a doctorate in Homeland Security and business administration. And I was able to use that to land myself a job at NASA. And now I work as a federal agent, and I oversee all the day-to-day security operations. So that's kind of the quick version about me. I also teach at a local state college as an adjunct professor. So I love being able to share some of the things that I've learned. I love learning from the people in the classes that I come in contact with, because I truly believe that we are not all experts, but when we come together as a group, then we become a group of very seasoned professionals that have a lot of knowledge to give. So for this presentation, I really encourage you to share ideas, because that's how we learn from one another. Use the chat feature to share those types of things and things that you learn. Maybe there's things that I don't share that you're doing that works really, really well. I encourage you to share that with your peers, because that's how we grow. We learn from one another. We're able to share our stories of what works, what doesn't work, and kind of spark ideas for others. So use that chat feature as we go along. So one of the things that I say is, when it comes to training alone is not going to fix your problem. I see so many people attend recruitment and retention classes again and again and again. They go to FDIC, they go to FRI, they go to their state, they go to their local, they're online, they're taking all these great training courses, and then they're complaining that nothing changes. Well, the problem is that they fail to go back and implement what they learn. You know, we as instructors, we don't have a magic wand. We can't fix it for you. You've got to be willing to make some change within your own organization. And yes, I know that sometimes change is uncomfortable, but you know, we need to be willing to make that change, feel those change pains, as I like to call it, for a little bit, so that we can see things change. Because we know that the way things are going in the volunteer fire service, we're seeing a decline, and we definitely need to implement some type of change. So to change our behavior, we need a system. You know, and towards the end of this conversation today, you'll hear me talk about developing a strategic recruitment retention plan. We need a system, because when we don't have a system, when we don't allow ourselves to have a plan, then we're all over the place. It's kind of like, let's say you're taking a journey from Maryland to California. Sure, you can get in your car and you can drive all the way across the country, and eventually you're going to get there. But if you have a map or a GPS, that's your system. It's going to get you to your final destination with, you know, using your resources more efficiently and in less time. So remember that as you travel the recruitment and retention path, that you need to create a system for your department. So what is the problem? Well, you know, when it comes to this, you know, issue with recruitment and retention, we know that we have a decrease in volunteers, and the cost of turnover is huge. Think about, you know, as you lose volunteers, it's costing you what you invested in training, what you invested in equipment and PPE. And so we know the cost is high. We've seen a huge decline in volunteers over the years, you know, and I think the last numbers that I was given was, you know, just under 15%. So, you know, that's definitely an issue. And then the engagement of millennials in the workplace is only 29%. And this is where all my seasoned people see, yep, that's it. It's the young people's problem. They broke the volunteer fire service. You know, they're the reason we can't get volunteers. I knew it. No, that's not what that means. What it means is millennials in general and our younger generation, their engagement in the workplace is 29%, meaning that this younger generation, puts a greater focus on family and relationships outside of the work environment. That's amazing because, today we know it's Father's Day, and we know that family engagement is key. So it is so great to see that our young people value family more than work, because that wasn't that way for a lot of us growing up. Our parents and even us, we were so dedicated to our jobs that we didn't give a lot of effort at home that maybe we should have. So it's great to see that. And we need to keep that in mind as we're developing our programs, as we develop our tactics to recruit and retain, that our younger generations, they value family, they value time with their friends. So keep that in mind as we go throughout today's discussion. So, all right, so what's the other problem? The other problem is whoops, let me back up here. I got a little mouse happy. Firefighters hate two things: change in the way things are. And the late Chief Brunacini, that was something that he said. And we know that that is very true. We like to complain about things, and we complain about how things are, but then we complain about change as well. So we need to be aware of that. And as I mentioned earlier, change pains only, that pain is just short term, but the outcomes outlive that pain. All right, so take a look at this video.
A group of scientists placed 5 monkeys in a cage and in the middle a ladder with bananas on top. Every time a monkey went up the ladder, the scientists soaked the rest of the monkeys with cold water. After a while, every time a monkey went up the ladder, the others beat up the one on the ladder. After some time, no monkey dared go up the ladder, regardless of the temptation. Scientists then decided to substitute one of the monkeys. The first thing this new monkey did was go up the ladder. Immediately, the other monkeys beat him up. After several beatings, the new member learned not to climb the ladder, even though he never knew why. A second monkey was substituted, and the same occurred. The first monkey participated on the beating for the second monkey. The replacements repeated until what was left was a group of 5 monkeys that, even though never received a cold shower, continued to beat up any monkey who attempted to climb the ladder. If you asked the new group of monkeys why the beatings took place, the answer would probably be,
well, I don't know. That's just how things are done around here.
So looking at that video, how true is that? I look at the volunteer fire service and the fire service in general. And as a new recruit, they come in with so much energy. They come in with all these great ideas, skills and tactics they might have learned from the academy, and they have these fresh ideas. And what do? We're like, nah, that'll never work here. We break their spirit. We like try, we start to stomp out their passion. So we need to be careful of that. So as we go through our discussion today, I want you to think about that. We don't want to be those people that are putting out the passion of our new recruits. And we want to be those people, whoops, we don't want to watch that again. We want to be the people that are lighting that passion, are fueling that passion so that we can continue to recruit and retain. So for this, I conducted a study for my dissertation on this topic, on recruitment retention, because I knew that there was an issue here in Ohio that, we were struggling to get members, we were struggling to get people to stay. And what I found, when I did the research, as you guys know, that it just wasn't a local problem. It was a huge problem. It was a national problem. So what I learned in the study was the answer to our issue, the magic behind the science, is it's all about people. It's all about taking care of your stakeholders, about changing what we do to meet the needs of our current recruits, our current volunteers, and our potential volunteers. So think about that. The magic to fixing all of this problem is people and making sure that we accommodate people. So I started in my study to ask this question. What strategies do volunteer fire service leaders use to retain volunteer firefighters? Because I wanted to look at departments that were doing things right, because I found a ton of departments that were struggling with the same issue. So, I ventured out to find departments that actually had data to back up their retention numbers. So after a lot of research and exploring across the country, different departments, I did interview some very successful departments. And what I found were some themes. What they did was schedule accommodations. And we're going to dive into these themes even more. Schedule accommodations with training and duty hours. Non-wage benefits were important. Opportunities for employee success, recognition, family. Remember I mentioned that earlier with our younger generation, family is key. And how you recruit was important. Everything that I looked at, it kind of tied back to a theory called Freeman stakeholder theory. And again, it goes back to, we got to meet what the demands of the people. It's all about what the people want. So everything that you learned today, all the tactics and strategies that I'm going to offer you are research proven, were proven to work, so these weren't just some ideas that I came up with, this was from a 3-year research process. So I hope that you get some great takeaways today, but to understand the issue of recruitment and retention, we need to look at the barriers, because again, we don't take a car and drop it off at the mechanic shop and say, hey, fix this, and not give them any information to go on, because if we did that, it would become costly. So, I started to explore what are the top barriers to retention in the fire service. And these are the things that I came up with, was the sleep deprivation, gender specific issues, mental health, work-life balances, generational factors, and organizational climate. And we're going to dive into each of these a little deeper. So let's talk about sleep deprivation. Well, we know that we're in a high-risk profession, and on the nights that we get deployed, studies show that we're only getting 3 to 6 hours of sleep. I don't know about you, but when I don't get sleep, I get really cranky. And when our volunteers are not getting sleep, that leads to crankiness, so which causes issues within their relationships at home. It causes issues at work. It also, we found that our volunteers are reporting, because they're tired, they're having some poor performance on the job in their workplace, because they're so exhausted from being up all night and serving that they're just tired the next day. So that's something to think about. How do we fix that sleep issue? And we'll get into that in a little bit. So one thing I want to point out that's a little bit different is in law enforcement, which is another high-risk profession that I work in. We actually have a rule where we're not allowed to work or engage in another job 8 hours before we go on shift, because they want to make sure that we're able to get a good night's sleep. And as we're making those critical life and death type of decisions, that we're doing that, where we're at a point where our brains are functioning fully. So why are we not doing that in the fire service? So gender differences. This was another barrier that I found, is that, the issue, there was these specific barriers tied to gender. And I know yesterday I was able to deliver a message to the same group on allyship, and we talked a lot about the gender differences. And what we know is that less than 10% of volunteers in the fire services are female. But the interesting fact is that the national ratio, women volunteer, the ratio is that they volunteer 3 times more than men in general in serving their community. And I'm not talking about the fire service, I'm talking about just volunteering in general. So what does that tell us? That tells us that women have a heart for service, and we have this demographic that's just untapped. But we need to also keep in mind that when it comes to women in the fire service, there is an increased risk to mental health and injury. And it's a 33% more increase of a risk than with our male counterparts. And why is that? Well, we know that the mental health issues stem from social exclusion and some of the bullying that women face in the fire service. The injury rates is because women, we're less likely to say, hey, I need some help over here. So think about this. Let's say we're at a structure fire, and we're to the point where we're at the end and we're doing cleanup, and we're pulling ceilings and doing all that stuff. And you're male and you're all working together. Men may say to their counterpart, hey, I'm going to call it quits and go get some water. You want to finish this? Where a woman may not say that because she doesn't want to be viewed as weak. She doesn't want to ask her male counterpart for help or say, I'm exhausted, I need to call it quits, because we've already had these stereotypes put on women in the fire service where they're weak and they can't do that job. So they'll push themselves. Women will push themselves to the point where their body just can't take it, which leads to injury. When it comes to gender differences, we also have the issue where we just don't communicate well. There's a failure to communicate. And I shared this story yesterday that, sometimes we make assumptions about what one another wants. I had a female firefighter come to me. She was upset. She said her chief was discriminating against her. And I said, well, share with me what happened. And here she became pregnant. She shared that on social media and with her colleagues. Everybody congratulated her. And then the chief said, hey, I'm going to put you on light duty, to the end of your pregnancy. And she was furious because her doctor said she could perform. And I said, well, and she's like, he's discriminating. I'm like, well, let's have a conversation. I knew this chief. I said, can I talk to him? Well, here, the chief thought he was being too overprotective. He was trying to look out for what he thought was her best interest. So he automatically assumed, I'll move her to light duty. I'll protect her and the baby. But what happened was there was this failure to communicate. So he thought he was doing something good. She thought he was doing something bad. So we really got to break down this communication barrier so that we can start to communicate more. Mental health in general, mental health, men and women, it's a huge issue in the fire service. We know that. Over a third of volunteer firefighters report a concern for depression. And this repeat exposure to the traumatic events that we see is definitely a key risk factor for substance abuse and mental health disorders in firefighters. And we are, now starting to talk a lot more about that. But think about that. Over a third of volunteer firefighters report a concern from depression. That's a huge number. And so we need to keep that in mind, because as our firefighters develop some of these issues, they start to disengage. And when you hear these numbers, how is that attractive for somebody wanting to enter the field? When you say, okay, you guys have got a lot of issues going on over here. I don't know if I want to be a part of that. So we need to think about that, as we're having our conversations and we're recruiting and retention and being real about the issues and how we address them. Work-life balance. We know this is another barrier. So 70% of our firefighters report a failure to balance volunteer and family commitments, 70%. So what does that mean? If you're, I think of it as the Gumby doll effect. You've got the fire service, you've got work, and you've got home, and you're being pulled on by all these different places. Eventually something's going to give. Either you're going to let down the people at home, you're going to let down the people at the fire service, or your job, and that you become emotionally exhausted. And when there's a lack of support at home, we know that our volunteer firefighters are less likely to engage. So, again, I want you to think about this number, because as we get into the solutions, we're going to talk more about this. But 70% report a failure to balance volunteer and family commitments. We, as fire service leaders, we got to do a better job of helping our volunteers balance that. So we'll talk more about that in a bit when we get to the solutions, but keep that number in mind. All right, so generational differences. We know that we have generational differences in how we communicate and how we learn. And in the fire service, we've got a big, long list of different identities and generations. And the thing that's changed over the years is now identities are global. Think back, especially if you've been in the fire service for a long time and before technology was a huge thing, your identity was created in this little local pocket. You hung out at a church or a fire department, but in the neighborhood that you grew up, that's where your identity was created, because you didn't know anything outside of that little pocket. Now, our youth, they have these global identities because they're connected all over the world. If they want to know something, not only can they read about another culture, but they can actually connect with others from that culture online, which is a very cool thing. However, it's created some kind of, there's this imbalance, because those people that are still living in these little pockets, these identities creating these little neighborhoods, they haven't yet learned to open up to the bigger world. So we need to think about that, which that leads to assumptions and stereotypes. And that's where we get into problems. We also know that how we access our information and our learning styles have changed. Our younger generation, and a lot of us, because of the pandemic, have now been forced to do online learning. Look at us today. Instead of being together in Ocean City, I'm stuck here in boring Ohio, instead of being with you guys in Ocean City. But our learning styles have changed. We've been able to adapt through technology. Our younger generations not only hear things in the classroom, but they're Googling, they're looking up answers. Like as you're teaching them, they're like, let me validate that. Let me make sure that's real, or let me do a little extra check. So I was at a fire department and, you know, they asked me to come in. They said, we have a real issue. And I'm like, okay, well, you know, let me come in and do an observation and I'll help you develop a strategic plan. So I'm observing and I hear this EMS captain, he puts this young recruit on the spot and says, show me how to work this. Well, it was obvious that this young kid didn't know how to work this piece of equipment. So rather than doing an introduction to the equipment, you know, this young kid was put on the spot. I see the kid kind of shift off over to the counter, behind like a little counter area, and he's on his phone and I'm watching, and I knew what he was doing. He was Googling that piece of equipment and how to operate it because he didn't want to look like a fool in front of his respected leader. So the leader says to me after, see, I told you, he's so disrespectful. All these young kids are disrespectful. He's over there on his phone. And I said, because he was Googling how to operate this piece of equipment. I said, you put him on the spot and you asked him to demonstrate how to use it, but you didn't give him an opportunity to learn how to use it. So he was over there trying to teach himself. And the captain's like, I never thought about that. So again, you know, as we've got to start to be open-minded to how people learn and how they're accessing information. All right, what other barriers do we have? Well, we know that organizational climate is a huge barrier. We know that we only have, research tells us that we only have a 3 to 6 month window to snag up these volunteers and make them stay. In 3 to 6 months, they usually wash out. So you've got 3 to 6 months to convince them that you are the best organization to volunteer, get them engaged and get them excited so that they don't take their talents and go somewhere else. Within your organizational climate, it's important that you stop any bullying that's going on or any type of hazing, because if not, your potential volunteers are going to leave. Because remember, they're giving their time, they're donating their time. And we often don't think of that. For many of us, you know, we came from an era where it was just the pride to serve the fire service. It was a privilege to be a part of this fire service. But we need to remember, we're not the only game in town. There are a lot of other great organizations that people can volunteer for. So if we have an environment where there's bullying, hazing, and inappropriateness going on, people are going to bail and say, nope, I think I'm going to go volunteer at the Y, or I'm going to go volunteer at this other group. So keep that in mind. What does your environment look like? Poor leadership, that'll chase people away too. We know that this is kind of crazy. In the volunteer fire service, we know that only 38.5%, think about that, 38.5% of firefighters, volunteer firefighters, report levels of job satisfaction. Okay, so we brag that we are absolutely wonderful. Being a firefighter is the greatest thing in the world. But the research says when we peel back that onion and ask people in private if they're satisfied, less than 39% so are actually satisfied. So what does that tell us? We got a lot of work to do. And then we need to think, do we train or complain? And I'm sure all of you guys have some of those negative people within your department. When you're at training, they're complaining about everything. Well, as people start to complain, our new recruits, they hear that. And again, it starts to poison the culture. So we need to make sure that the environment that we're establishing on the job in the firehouse during trainings is a positive one. We don't want to be complaining about leadership. We don't want to be complaining about our counties or other types of things. We want to keep a positive mindset. That way that we're focusing on our training and not getting into that negative vortex that'll suck you in. All right, so now we've talked about that. We just covered all of the barriers. So now let's dive into these strategies. So, and we're going to look at some of the strategies that are all tied, and these kind of, you'll see an overlap. It's like, hey, but that was part of a barrier. Absolutely. These strategies all kind of blend together. They kind of weave together. So we're going to take a look at each one of these individually. All right, so non-wage benefits. One of the biggest things that I found in the research was it isn't that people want money. I thought for sure, my assumption was that volunteers would be motivated by money. Let's give them stipends, let's give them this kind of stuff. But that wasn't what they wanted. That never even made the top list of reasons people stay and volunteer. This is what did the non-wage benefits, an attractive work environment. What does your firehouse look like? Is it an environment where people can come and want to be around? And when I say attractive work environment, some of the departments that were successful, they created areas where people could come hang out, maybe play pool, play games, where it was an environment where people would want to be. Do you offer professional development opportunities? This was a huge thing that rose to the top, is that people want to learn. And it's not just fire service and EMS skills, but what other type of professional development opportunities can you offer? Do you need someone to manage your social media? If you do, can you send somebody to a social media class outside of the fire service that isn't fire service related? Do you need a project manager? If you've ever done a station build or bought a new piece of equipment, project management skills come in handy. So could you send somebody to get a project management certification or a mini certification? Because that helps them on their resume. You know, what kind of professional development opportunities can you offer somebody that can benefit them in their career, not just in the fire service? So think about that. Team building activities. That was a huge thing. You know, I remember when I first started in the fire service in my own area, local softball games and different team building activities were huge within departments individually and in the county. And I saw where we phased that away from that. But what team building activities can you offer within your department? Because that'll help boost your recruitment and your retention numbers. And when you're probably thinking, how does team building help build recruitment? Well, when you're posting photos of your firefighters and their families out there doing maybe kickball or having cookouts and things like that, that sends a message that this is a really cool environment and, you know, really cool place to hang out. People want social inclusion. So, you know, having those team building activities, those activities that, you know, that build relationships are important. Branded items. This is the thing that rose to the top. People want uniforms. People want to wear the logo. So if you can offer those uniforms, Class A, Class B, as your people are coming in, the t-shirts, that'll help with your retention. So let people know, you know, what is your plan? Oh, if you volunteer for 6 months, we will provide you with this type of uniform. If you do this, you get this type of uniform. How can people earn those branded items? Branded items make people feel like part of the team. And if you think back to when you first got your first fire department t-shirt, how did that make you feel? You know, that, you know, for me, I know that was very special. It was like, this is great. This is wonderful. So think about that. I know for many of us, we've been in the fire service for so long that we forget, you know, that excitement that we felt when we got that first t-shirt. But those items mean a lot. Environmental factors, you know, again, what does the environment look at your fire department? One department that I worked with, they actually put a washer and dryer in at their fire department so that their volunteers could come and wash their clothes. So a lot of people, you know, going to the laundromat is a struggle. It's a financial struggle and a time struggle. So they put in a washer and dryer where their members could come and wash clothes. Well, what does that do? Well, while people are there washing their clothes, they're there to run the calls. If the tones drop, you got people there. And that washer and dryer is just a little incentive. You know, it's something to encourage people. It helps meet a need within their family life. Remember that 70% of how do I balance the volunteer world and how do I balance my family commitment, work commitments? Well, putting that washer and dryer, you know, that's meeting a need for somebody. So opportunities for employee success. This was another strategy that came up. It was very important that we give our volunteers the opportunity to succeed. So one of the things that I see in the volunteer fire service and the fire service in general and in EMS is that we don't always allow our new members the opportunity to succeed. So think about this. You get that big structure fire. You know, you're getting ready to crack the nozzle open and you see the seasoned firefighter up there on the nozzle. We need to do better. We need to look at the young recruits, the new people, and say, hey, you know, you come up here, you get up here, allow them those opportunities to perform and not want to suck it all up and say, oh, we'll get you next time. And I see that a lot in EMS as well. You know, you get those bad calls, you got the new paramedic, the new EMT there, but the seasoned people say, you know what, let me just do this because this is a bad call. But if we don't allow our people the opportunity for success, to be able to utilize the skills that they learn, that we train and pay for them to learn, then they're going to start to phase out. They're going to be like, well, I never get to do anything anyhow, so why should I even show up? So think about that. The other thing when it comes to setting the stage for employee success is we have to communicate expectations. What are your expectations? We can't assume that people know what the department expects out of them. Do you have a training calendar? Do you have set expectations of how many hours of training that they have? Put it in writing. What are some key, like as far as within your department, you have key dates and fundraisers. Send that, to them all in advance. One of the things that I'll never forget, I remember this one fundraiser. We had some new people, and the big fundraiser came around, and they're like, oh, well, I have plans. I'm going here or there. And the seasoned members started to fall apart. Well, you need to be here. But that was never communicated to them when they onboarded, that the expectation is that everybody would be at that fundraiser, and why. So the new members thought it was something optional. It was just something extra because it was never communicated. So be sure to put those things in writing and explain to people why it's important. What are your rules? We can't assume that everybody knows the rules. A lot of people say to me, well, that should be common sense. We have to remember, we weren't all raised the same way. So you've got to set those expectations in writing. What are the rules? Because people will, how do they know they're breaking a rule if you don't tell them what the rule is? So offer a path to success. As you start to onboard people, let people know, here's how you get to my position. Here's how you get to this white helmet. These are the trainings you have to take. This is the experience you need to have. Our young recruits, our potential volunteers, they want to know, how do I get to that officer's position? Lay it out for them. Provide them a roadmap. Write that path down. How do you go from Pro B to Chief? Here's the steps you need. Here's the classes. So provide that for them. Physical fitness. One of the things that in the research showed is that to be successful and to retain volunteers, we need to make sure that our firefighters are physically fit. So one of the things that we know is that we want to sometimes recruit anybody with a pulse, and that is not always a good thing, because we know physical fitness is important. The line of duty death is a real thing when it comes to cardiac issues. So we need within a department to promote physical fitness. And how do we do that? We can offer challenges. We can say, we're going to do a step challenge this month, or whatever that might look. We can bring in outside trainings. So just in about every state in the country, there is a effective food and nutrition program. It's usually run through one of your state land grant universities. In Ohio, it's run through Ohio State University. And they will actually come in and do a free class on how to eat healthy on a budget. And they teach people how to eat healthy, how to make good food choices, because I'm very cautious about this. There's a lot of fancy trends on healthy eating and dieting and exercising. Make sure that whatever it is that you're promoting within your department is something that is research-based and not just a trend. So one of my favorite groups is Dan Kerrigan and Jim Moss. They do a functional firefighter fitness. They have a book, they have some classes, and they do a phenomenal job. And the work that they've done is research-based, and it's using tools within your own fire department. But it's important to promote physical fitness and get our firefighters healthy if we want to retain members. And that's also going to be important when you're looking to recruit. Where do we go to recruit physically fit firefighters? Start to think 5Ks, the gym, things like those. And we'll get more into that when we talk about recruitment. But, we definitely want to make sure that the people that we're recruiting are physically fit to do the job. All right, so providing feedback. We know that providing feedback is so Kate said that Dan Kerrigan is actually doing a functional fitness live today at 1:22 p.m. or 12 p.m. So I really encourage you to check Dan Kerrigan's class out. Dan is wonderful. He's a good friend. You make sure you tell Dan I said hello in the chat feature if you attend his class, and then I gave him a plug. So moving on, providing feedback. Providing feedback is a huge, important thing in the fire service. Not just bad feedback, but we need to give good feedback, and we need to make sure that it's timely. Timely feedback is important. A lot of times what I see in the volunteer fire service is that we're afraid to hurt people's feelings. But guess what? We need to offer constructive criticism. So if you're at a fire scene or an EMS scene and you see somebody making a mistake, you can just walk over and say, hey, Joe, hey, Jane, let me show you a better way to do that. and help them with their skills. When you say it that way, it's not as threatening as like, oh, you're screwing up, you're doing that wrong. Just, let me show you an easier way to do that. So feedback in relevant time is important. Now, if I saw somebody making a mistake on the fire scene or an EMS scene, and I waited until the next business meeting and say, oh, we're going to have a talk about X, Y, and Z, because in my mind, I knew somebody made a mistake, that's not going to be effective. But being able to address that in real time is important. Just like when you see somebody doing something good. Hey, Jane, hey, Joe, nice job. That was good work today, because you want to reinforce that. So that's, it's very important. With feedback, it's important to do evaluations. I'm very big about doing written performance evaluations for volunteers. And when you do the written performance evaluations, it's an opportunity also to ask your volunteer, what's your next step? Where do you want to be within this department? Are you looking to advance your skills in this area? Do you want to advance in leadership? Because it's important that we get feedback as well, so we can help our members grow. We also want to ask our members, about feedback about ourselves. How do you feel about this department? Do you feel leadership's doing a good job? What could we doing better? But be prepared as we're getting that feedback and receiving that feedback. Be prepared to hear things that we might not like. But you need to think about feedback as a way for you to improve. Flexible schedule. So this was another huge thing that popped up was being flexible with our members. One of the things that always amazes me, that we're still so stuck in the volunteer fire service of Monday night is training at 7 p.m. or whatever set night that you might have. And you have to be there to get your hours or you're going to be in trouble. Well, what does that do? Well, by having this, you must be here every Monday at 7 p.m. That forces Firefighter Joe or Firefighter Jane to pick between the fire department and little Johnny's soccer game or little Jane's soccer game. So we need to stop that. We need to stop forcing our firefighters to pick between their family commitments, their commitments, and their volunteer. And you're probably thinking, well, how do they do that? We have to have training. Well, this is where some of the successful departments, what they've done is they've offered alternative training nights. So let's say this week we're learning, how to use new extrication equipment. So we develop a lesson plan on extrication, and we have a couple different officers that are qualified to teach that. Okay, I'm going to teach that on Monday. I'm going to teach that on Wednesday morning because I work afternoons. That way I can cover, the people that work midnights and afternoons. I'm going to teach that on the weekends, because the people that don't want to are unable to commit during the week might have a better opportunity to catch that training on a Saturday. So offer that same training multiple times. And I've had officers say, well, only 3 people will show up on those days. But guess what? That's 3 people that might not have came at all if you would have only had it on that single night. So the one department that I worked with, the chief said to me, bring your gear. We're going to do training. I said, on a Friday night? He said, yeah. Friday nights are one of my most popular training nights. So I brought my gear with me when I traveled to this department. It was out of state. And on a Friday night, they had over 20 members at this training on a Friday night. And when I talked to the people at the training, they said, Friday nights work great for us because we don't have to get up for work on Saturday. We're already done with the work week. We're not finishing up those extra projects. And it just works out great. So think about that. Offering a flexible training schedule is a way that you can accommodate your members. The other thing that you can do is offer pre-learning. We know virtual learning works. So have people, hey, here's a video, learn how to use this equipment. And then we're going to have a time period where you can come, you can perform the actual skills and get signed off. So that way they're using their classroom time. They're able to do that at home and not have to take away from their family. They can do when it works and then just come in and sign off on their skills. You have to remember. So a lot of you might have grown up in the age where men were generally in the fire service and the woman stayed home with the kids. But now we're in an era where both the mom and the dad are working. Both the mom and dad are in the fire service, which is absolutely wonderful. So not everybody has daycare. They might have jobs and things like that. So they're arranging, to work around your training, which gets into another point is respect people's time. If you say you're going to start a training at 7 p.m., don't chit chat until 7:30 and start it. Start right at at 7 p.m. and be done at whatever scheduled time that you have, 7 to 9. Don't go over, because people may have to pick up their children from daycare. They may have another job. They might be studying, or they might have plans with family or friends. So be respectful with the scheduling. If you're saying 7 to 9, you stick to that. Employee recognition. This is still a huge thing. Our employees want to be recognized. And when I say employees, I'm talking about volunteers, because it kind of goes, I see volunteers as employees of the fire department. But employee recognition, it doesn't have to be costly. You can recognize people on social media. You can make paper certificates. You can ask your local and state and federal representatives to sign a certificate of accommodation for your volunteers. Giving those personal and public kudos is huge. It's also important to ask your members how they want to be recognized. Not everybody likes attention. And how do we do that? You could just do a little survey. Hey, we're going to be doing some recognition. How do you like to be recognized? And have people fill out a little survey. I'm okay with being recognized on social media. Check. Nope. I'd like to be recognized in private. Check. I like to be recognized. I'm okay with being recognized at our company meetings. Check. I'm okay with being recognized in our company newsletters. Check. Find out how they like to be recognized and make a list of that and respect that. But recognizing people, it goes a long way. So, be sure to do that and recognize those little things as they finish a training. Maybe it's something in their personal life, like they just graduated college or they obtained a new trade. Recognize those things as well. Make people know that they're important. It sends that message. Maybe their child got married or graduated. So when you're at the fire department meeting, hey, Jane and Joe's daughter just graduated college. Congratulations. Make sure that you're recognizing those big accomplishments in people's life. It sends a message that people care, which will help with your retention. So creating a supportive environment. We talked earlier about mental health issues being a huge issue. So how do we create a supportive environment? We talk about mental health issues. We talk about substance abuse issues. We take the negative stigma away from it, and we offer the help. We post resources. We work with our community mental health providers. We ask them to come in and do a presentation, not just for our firefighters and our EMS officials, but also for their families, because who's going to recognize those signs first? It's going to be their loved ones at home. So hold classes on recognizing the signs and symptoms. And what do you do when that happens? Talk about that every single month. By the way, if you're struggling, we have these programs. Here's a number that you can call. Put the literature around your fire department. The other thing that I see is that as volunteers start to struggle with some of these things, they start to disengage and they slowly start to slip away. So what happens when people don't come around the fire department for a while and then they show back up maybe a couple months? Oh, where have you been? Do I know you? We start to harass them, and we need to be careful of that, because maybe they slipped away to deal with some family issues. Maybe they're struggling. What we need to start to say is, hey, I haven't seen you in a while. Is everything okay? Is there anything that we can do? Making those phone calls, having a buddy check, accountability program where, hey, you're responsible for this list of firefighters and EMS folks. If they don't come around, can you make a phone call, send a text and say, hey, we miss you. Is everything okay? Ask the questions and then connect people with the help that they need. We got to do a better job of that. We owe it to one another. And I always say, I always tell people, we are so great at watching out for each other on the fire ground. I know that if I showed up at a structural fire and I didn't have a piece of equipment on, you're going to say, hey, you forgot your hood. You forgot this. Here, this is hanging out. Let me buckle this up for you. Why are we not doing that when it comes to us as individuals and looking out for each other? So we got to do a better job of that. Family. As I mentioned earlier, family has become such an important role. It always has been important, but we haven't put a huge emphasis. Lucky for us, our younger generation, they are all about putting family first. Our moms, our dads, they want to be involved with their families, and they're not always willing to sacrifice that to be engaged with the fire service. So knowing that, we have to implement strategies that foster family support, that gets the family involved. We can conduct family orientations to introduce the family to what it's like to be a part of the volunteer fire service. We can foster family support by linking families together. We can conduct family surveys to see how happy our families are and what is it that they need. We can hold events like family movie nights. What kind of trainings can you offer at your fire department that benefits your firefighters plus the families. I talked about the mental health one. We talked about the eating healthy on a budget. That's something that can be done for families. We know that some of our volunteer fire service families struggle with financial things. We could offer financial classes on how to budget, how to save, those types of things. So start to brainstorm and make a list of the different things that we can offer family and really engage the family and make them feel like they're part of the fire service. And we know that there's other roles our family members can get involved in and help. And that's the other thing you need to be careful. One of the things that I was working with the fire department and I was talking to their families, and the one wife says, I was really upset that they expected me as the wife to help out at the fundraiser. I didn't sign up for this. I have babies to take care of at home. So we have to also be careful that we don't expect our families to step up and do things without asking if they would be interested. So again, with that family survey, we could say, we have opportunities for family involvement. Are there any areas here where you would like to donate your time or get involved? So again, it goes back to asking and not making assumptions, but we got to get our families involved. All right, so we talked earlier about gender being an issue. Well, size and gender matter. So when I say size, I'm not just talking about women, I'm talking about men and women, because if we don't provide the proper equipment to our men and women of different sizes, we're setting them up for failure. So what I'd like for you to do is next time you're in the kitchen, I want you to put your oven mitts on. Put some oven mitts in, and then I want you to go and tie your shoes. Let me know how that works out for you, because that's what it's like for me as a female firefighter with smaller hands, or for a male firefighter with smaller hands, to put ill-fitting gloves on. It feels like you're trying to tie your shoes with oven mitts. It's very difficult. And for many of us, we had to go through the academy that way. And we got to get away from these assumptions. So years ago, there was the book, Men Are for Mars and Women Are for Venus. We're like, oh, they're so different. Here's the X, Y, and Z of how you have to communicate and why they're different. We have to get away from these stereotypes. Boys have trucks, girls have dolls. It's not that way. We've got to stop thinking like that. And remember, it's about individuals. We need to start to create an environment that fosters communication and just asking people, what is it that you want? What can I do? Always ask the question, how can I help you be successful? What is it that you need from us to be successful? So think about that. And when it comes to gender, think about your recruitment. Do your campaigns, show women in the fire service. Are you sending a message that women are welcome? Because for so long, women were not welcome in a lot of different fire departments, and that message and that's kind of still lingering. So people will ask me, how do I feel about the word fireman versus firefighter? And this is what I'll tell you. I always use the term firefighter for this reason. If I'm teaching, fire prevention education within the school system, and somebody is saying Fireman Joe, Fireman Joe, Fireman Joe, that sends a message to all those little girls that only boys can be firemen. And I want every little girl to know that they have the opportunity to serve. Because again, think about what we learned earlier. Women are 3 times more likely to volunteer. And I want those girls to grow up and be the girls that want to volunteer for our fire department. So I want to embed that early into their brain, that it's firefighters, and that they have an opportunity to belong. So that's why I always use that term. Think about your job assignments that you're giving people when it comes to gender. Don't make assumptions. And earlier I talked about communication being an issue when it becomes, talking about gender problems. I remember I was the first female to join our fire department. The chief says to me, I don't know what to do with you. And I said, okay, well, just ask. It's all about communication. Let's have conversations when you get stuck. I'm very open to that, but I also am asking you permission for me to be able to share to you when I'm not okay with things. And so we established that right up front, and it worked well. So we're getting ready to do one of our big fundraisers, and I look at the assignment sheet, and I was in the kitchen, and I said, why am I in the kitchen? And the gentleman on that assignment sheet goes, well, I thought you'd want to be with the wives and help cook. And he made an assumption. He thought he was doing me a favor by putting me there. And I said, you probably should talk to my husband, because my cooking is not up to par. And I would rather be on trash duty. Can I be moved to there because I'm not good in the kitchen? So it came down to, he thought he was doing me a favor, and I'm like, no, don't put me in the kitchen. That's like the worst job ever. So again, we need to, when we're looking at job assignments, we can't make the assumption of where people go. We just need to ask, hey, where would you like to volunteer your time? Recruitment. So when our recruitment tactics, we need to make sure that our recruitment ads reflect the communities which they represent. We know that there's not a whole lot of minorities in the fire service, But we know in the communities that we serve, that's not how that they look. The communities that we serve do not always look like the fire department membership. So we need to make sure that our recruitment reflects the communities that we serve, because we want to make sure that everybody knows that there is a role for them within the fire service. And so it's important as you're developing your communication pieces, your print ads, that you're reflecting, all the different demographics within your community. So we kind of looked at some of the top strategies. Now we're going to kind of look at what the next step is. And this is the part where I'm going to challenge you to do the work. Remember when I said you have to have a plan? You've got to have a game plan, when you're developing a recruitment retention plan. I have a plan, a template that I can email you that covers the what, the who, the resources, the potential barriers, the communication, the timeline, the success check. And I can also provide you a bunch of other resources, because it's all about giving resources. And there's, of course, no cost for any of those resources, because it's all about sharing. So and this worksheet that I'll send you will help you develop your game plan, which leads into these questions that I want you to start to think about. What roles do you have to offer? As you're developing your recruitment plan, you need to identify what roles do you have to offer people, because it's critical to recruit the right fit, for both the volunteer and the organization. We need to identify what tasks and roles you need to fill. Do I need fire prevention? Do I need firefighters? Do I need EMTs? Do I need a social media manager? Do I need a webmaster? List out all those roles, and they don't have to be all emergency roles. Just every single role that you have within your fire department that you need man and woman power for, make a list. Then list out what the job description is. That way people know what the expectations are. How many people do you need to fill those? What is the time commitment tied to each role? The training, the department expectations, the recertification. List all of that out so that as you begin to recruit, you're recruiting based on a job description. What does your onboard processing look? You might need to revamp that. You need to have a membership application that's both paper and electronic form. We know in today's environment that if you are relying on people to fill out a paper form, it's probably not going to get filled out in return. But if you create some type of electronic form, and you could do that for free using tools like Google Docs, and they hit submit, they're going to do that as they're looking at your website, your social media. It's like, oh, okay, I think I want to do this. I'll fill this out, submit, boom, you got them. But if you're relying on people to do the paper form, you might not get that back. But you still want to have both, because there's people that don't like electronic forms, and we don't want to exclude our generations that are not about technology, because there's a role for everybody. You also have to have a quick turnaround, engage them quickly. Sure, they may not be able to start training right away, but you could say, hey, thank you for filling out the form while we're waiting on your background check, this and this. I'd love to invite you down to the fire department for a cup of coffee or a Coke, and give you a tour. So that's a way to engage them, start to get them excited. Make sure that you have that written expectations. Do you have a code of ethics? There's the National Firefighter Code of Ethics. I really encourage you to have that. What is your contract requirement for being a volunteer? If we pay for your training, what do we expect in return? What are the rules? A calendar? Do you have a family guide? Develop a family guide that you can give them as part of the onboarding process. So schedule accommodations. Earlier, we talked about how important it was to schedule, around the needs of the members. Do you do duty crews, or are you still expecting people to respond to a % of calls? I always challenge people with that. If your goal is you need to respond to X % of calls, we can't predict when emergencies happens. But if you say you need to put yourself on a duty crew schedule where you're around from X amount of numbers to this amount of time on a certain day, and that's your requirement, then you're going to get people that'll sign up. And you could do that using a Google Calendar. I can send you a template, and that's what we did at our department, where everybody had to give 5 hours on the schedule a week. And that 5 hours doesn't have to be blocked off in a certain amount of time. Maybe I can do 2 hours around little Johnny's soccer game here, an hour on Saturday, 2 hours on another night. So allow people to take control of their schedule. Maybe you have a key meeting coming up that you have to get key information out. You can use a doodle.com and send that out to try to find the best night to hold that meeting. You can record those meetings and allow people to watch them at a later time, and then sign off that they did watch that meeting. We already talked about the multiple training nights, virtual participation. Those are all great things. Remember, it's about quality engagement, not quantity engagement. So we want to make sure that we're offering quality stuff to our departments around when, it meets their schedule. So what non-wage benefits do you have to offer? Make a list of these things that you have to offer, because these are going to be key in your recruitment efforts. We have uniforms, we have branded swag items. If you're a member of our department, we have these professional development opportunities that we'll pay for you to get, that'll help you in your career life. I talked about the washer and dryer earlier. What does your environment look like? Is it somewhere where people can come and hang out and want to be a part of? Student-friendly environments are important too. Maybe people don't have a quiet place at home to study, but you can offer them a little study room with a computer and printer where they can study. Have planned activities. We talked about this earlier. Planned team building activities are so important. And that's those could be all used in your recruitment. Hey, come join XY fire department. We have these planned activities. We want you to be a part of that. So how can you ensure success? What's going to be in your recruitment plan? Again, in your retention plan, develop those clear expectations, write that code of ethics, have all that down. Develop that career plan, write it down to provide to people, to conduct your member evaluations, your family surveys, making sure you're providing the same opportunity for all. Assign a mentor. Mentors are so important. Mentors, there's a lot of acronyms in the fire service. It's overwhelming if you've never been in the fire service and you walk in the door and everybody's using these acronyms, learning about this equipment that you've never heard of. But if you assign mentors to help somebody along in the process, that'll help them from bouncing in that 3 to 6 month onboarding window where we lose people. How can we create a team that's fit for duty? We've talked about this a little bit earlier. Do you have a formal health and wellness program? Can you partner with a local gym or offer an internal gym? Are you doing physicals? It's so important that we do the firefighter physicals. If you've never heard Kevin Quinn from the National Volunteer Fire Council speak about how that physical saved his life, I encourage you to do a Google search on that and learn more about that. Accountability. We got to start holding each other accountability for good lifestyle choices. Fun challenges, can we do fun, physical challenges? Absolutely. And I'm sure Dan Kerrigan will offer you guys some great tips on that this afternoon. So feedback, again, we talked about this earlier. This should be part of your plan. Are we going to have a formal feedback process? What is that going to look like? How are we going to provide timely feedback? What type of evaluations are we going to offer? Self, peer, employer? What type of written feedback do we plan to give? Are we going to create a culture where constructive criticism that helps people grow is okay? How can we recognize? Start to brainstorm how you can recognize your members through member achievements, paper certificates, social media spotlights, training recognition surveys, those small little tokens that you can give people, celebrate their personal life celebrations. So start to develop a list of how you can recognize those people. And maybe you have to appoint somebody to be the person that kind of, I always call it the morale coordinator, so to speak. They can start to be in charge of recognizing those things, and people could say, submit things to that person. Maybe Joe Smith's the morale coordinator. Hey, and Joe could say, hey, did you know so-and-so, their daughter just did this, or they just completed this class. So you create a culture where you're encouraging recognition and celebration. That'll go a long way. So how do we create a supportive environment? What should be in your plan for that? So, again, we talked about the mental health stuff being so important. We need to establish relationships with our firefighters. We need to put those posters up. We need to have those monthly reminders. We need to have presentations that include family, do peer monitoring, debriefings. We need to change the culture. So start to brainstorm a list. All of these questions that I'm offering in this part of the presentation, these are all your brainstorming questions. These are the things that you can take back to your department and start to brainstorm. How can we meet this goal? What can we do? Who's going to own that goal? How can we make family first? Start to brainstorm that. Are you going to develop an onboarding information process for family? Offer family swag, inclusive trainings, family nights, fire corps programs. Can we plug our family members into our auxiliary programs? Again, don't make it an expectation that they have to be, but an opportunity if they want to be. How can you be inclusive? Again, make sure you're doing an evaluation of your department. Is it an inclusive culture? Being accepting that we can do things differently, but have the same outcomes. What are the expectations, the training, the practices? What are the policies within your department? What do you tolerate? What do you turn a blind eye to? Do we need to reevaluate? Do we need to do some to clean up? How do we keep people happy? Brainstorm a list of this. Can we create a team environment? Can we start to eat, work, play together? We know that that's why the career department is so successful. They eat, they work, and they play together. Zap negativity. Are you allowing negativity to spread, or are you stopping it? I talked about that earlier. Respecting time is so important. Allowing members to have some ownership roles. Give people the opportunity to own some type of responsibility within your department. You don't have to be a leader to do that, but start to, if somebody says, you know, I'd really like to take on this project. Okay, you own that. This is your project. That'll help them start to want to engage and stay longer. Foster communication and listen. That is so important. So where can you recruit? Make a list of all the different places where you can recruit. Use those roles that you developed. Host activities, social media. Again, we talked about your application submission process. Have a quick response. Start to brainstorm your natural settings of where you go and set up a recruitment table. Because don't try to recreate the wheel. Go to where the people are and do some recruitment. So what's next? We're down to the end, and I want to make sure I respect your time. Well, what's next is I will send you that recruitment template, that recruitment plan and retention plan template that you can use, and you can go back and brainstorm with your own department to develop your recruitment and retention plan. And I'm going to also encourage you. I know Brian is on listening. They have created a Facebook page, and Brian could probably put that list here in the chat. I am going to encourage all of you to use the resources within your own state to come together, collaborate together, because when we build off of each other's ideas and we start to bounce those ideas, we can do great things. So join that Facebook group, share ideas, reach out to one another. Don't work in silos. Come together as a group. And so I'll open this up for any questions. We're now at 11 o'clock. I want to respect your time, because remember, that was one of the strategies. But for those that want to stay on for a few minutes and ask questions, go ahead and you can open up your mic and ask a question. So, or you can put it in the chat feature. Either way, if you think of questions later, you can also email me and I will share that with you later. I do offer this course in a 4-hour format and a longer format. And so I'd be willing to bring it to your area and to your department. And hopefully I'll see you next year in Ocean City and be able to share this message with you in person. So I got a question. What's the best way to get the older generation to break away from the one night of training idea? You know, I think that's a great question. And that's where we start to show them the data. We start to say, look, you know, here's our statistics. We have members that work jobs, afternoon, midnight shifts. We have members that are competing with family things. And let's try this for a trial. Can we do this and try it as a trial and see how it goes and see if it increases? So, you know, a lot of times data speaks to people, or just saying, can we try this as a trial and see if it improves things, and encourage them, say, you know, we can still keep our one night training of this night and you can attend that, but let's add these other options and see if it works. So, you know, kind of try to trial it and do it with that way. So let's see. How do you get older members to adapt and overcome changes? Those change pains. That's a harder thing. You engage them in the process. So when you're doing the brainstorming activities, you know, and sometimes if you have some very stubborn seasoned members who aren't willing to overcome change, that might be where you bring somebody else in to help you do your plan. And I've done that a lot with departments where I'll come in and I don't want to say I'm the bad guy, but I'm the person that says, let's refocus and let's think how we can focus on the future, because not everybody wants to listen to people with their own department. We know that is a big barrier. So that might be where you have to bring somebody in if you have a very stubborn department. But engaging the older members in that brainstorming process allows them to have some ownership. And that's why I encourage you to do those brainstorming sessions where you kind of get the flip chart out and you tell everybody, no idea is a bad idea. There's no negativity. We're going to brainstorm every single idea and just put them all up here. And then we can start to look at how we can put those to action. So, let's see. COVID forced us to do virtual meetings, but some of our older members would not or could not participate, even though there was a call-in number. Any ideas? Yeah, there's going to be times that people, they're not willing to change. And unfortunately, when it comes to that, even with the call-in number, we maybe you put it back on them and say, you know, for your safety and the safety of our members, this is the things that we're offering, what we're doing. You know, if you're not able to to join virtually and you're not interested in calling, how can we help accommodate you? Ask them, put it back on them. How can we help accommodate you? So maybe you have to record that meeting and they can go down and hit play at the fire station if they truly want to go in it. Or maybe if they aren't interested in doing any virtual and you're doing some hybrid, you broadcast the meeting, you do it like this, a Zoom, Facebook Live, whatever, or a private Facebook Live, I should say, up on a TV in your fire department, and then they get to be in person. Because for our older generation, again, remember when I talked about their identities were formed in neighborhoods, they value that time together. So maybe they just go to the department, or you encourage them to go, if they want to go to somebody's house and do it together and participate. So, but yeah, just put it back on them. Well, if anybody has any other questions, I encourage you, again, here's my contact information. Don't hesitate to reach out. I'm here to help. And like I said, I encourage you to utilize one another within your state and don't work in silos. So have a great Sunday. And again, happy Father's Day to those that are filling that father role.
Dr. McDonald?
Yes.
Jimmy Artis asks, what or how do we get the best recruitment flyers?
Ooh, great question. So here's a great thing that you might not know, but the National Volunteer Fire Council, they have this whole, if you can jump on there, they actually have recruitment flyers that you can just plug your information in and print. They've already created them for you. So I would really encourage you to check out the NVFC's website. If you need some help with that, I can get you linked up with them, but they do all the work for you. Like it's great. They knew that was a challenge for some firefighters. And so they created these templates. And you know, the other thing that I encourage you to do is your local high schools and community colleges, they may have a course that deals with creating such publications, and they may have an intern or students willing to help you draft stuff customized to your department. So reach out to them as well. And Kate was saying that the MSFA has some customizable marketing tools that you can use in the recruitment toolbox. So reach out to Kate, check out the website, and use those tools as well. So I encourage you to check out all those different tools and utilize them.
Thank you so much. I will definitely follow up with you by email. And we've reached out to the state for a couple ideas. Apologize for getting on here late. I just got my times confused, but I will definitely reach out to you because this was a great presentation, and thank you so much.
Great. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And yeah, please do reach out. Like I said, it's all about sharing. So, and if anybody's going to be at FDIC, I will be doing a 4-hour pre-con on this topic. So we'll actually work on building your plan. So
I may see you there.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
California Casualty has been endorsed by the MSFA for 10 years for its auto, home, and renter's insurance. It is our honor and privilege to protect those who protect our communities. Happy 10-year anniversary to the members of MSFA. Thank you for all that you do. For more information about our program, please visit www.calcash.com/MSFA. We look forward to seeing you at various local, county, and state events.